How about that? First time in my life I ever got to do that like that. About that for nonsense. Evening, everybody. Welcome to the Canyon Regional Water Authority Board of Trustees meeting for today. I believe it's the 11th. I'm going to call a roll call, but before they do that, I'd like to say we have two new members of the Board of Trustees that we just basically issued the oath of office to. First, we have Abigail Mayberry from Marion.
Hi, Abigail.
And we have,
Welcome.
yeah, well, guess what? Get the right set on. Do that again. Bill can't read it. It's Yvonne, though, right? Irene. It had an I in it. Two new board. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate that very much. You will see how these meetings run if you haven't been here before. Hopefully we run them smoothly. Hopefully we're not here till 3 o'clock in the morning.
They might not come back.
Mabel's like, we're not doing that. So if we can, we're going to get started. I'm calling the order. We'll do the roll call. I know darn well I'm here. You can hear me. Ted Gibbs. Here. Martin Poor is excused. Gary Gilbert. Here. Abigail Mayberry. Humberto Ramos. Teresa Shield. Donald Bosworth. Okay, he's been sick, right?
He had plans already before we changed the board meeting. I think he emailed someone, John or Hannah or somebody to explain.
Thank you. Regina Frankie.
Here.
Randy Schwinn. Brandon Rohan. I know he's going to be away. Mark Gilbert. Here. Mayor Al Suarez. Steve Cooper. Present. Christina Miller. Steve Fonville. James Forcell. Doris Stubing.
Here.
Mabel Vaughn. Someone else, I know he's not going to be here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That is a quorum. For our new members, it requires a minimum of 11 members to be seated in the room for the quorum to be present. There's 22 members. It's a simple mathematical. It's 50%, not +1. So 11 does it. We are golden. Next order is invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all bow your heads, please. Heavenly Father, we come again to thank you for the many blessings we each enjoy. We pray that you will watch over all of the staff here at CRWA, that you guide them as they make decisions and take steps to operate our water system. We also ask that you provide the members of this board with wisdom and knowledge as we conduct the business of this board. We ask that you watch over us all tonight as we travel home safely. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Then for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Stephen Fonville, are you here? Outstanding. Come on, you have a little fun with this. That makes 15. Okay. Huh? Oh, Irene, are you here?
I'm here.
That's 16. Danny, we're just picking up people left and right as we're sitting here at the chair. We hit 22, I'm going to be amazed. Happen. Item 5, public comments. Switch glasses. Comments on non-agenda items. No discussion from the board. There is a 3-minute time limit. Comments on specific items listed on our agenda. Discussion from and or with the board may be allowed. There is again a 3-minute time limit per citizen. Time may not be shared or ceded to another citizen. Member of the public wishing to make public comment during the meeting must register by email at HDIAZ, otherwise known as Hannah Diaz, at crwa.com prior to the meeting. Written comments may also be submitted. If you wish to speak, please state your name. Is anyone here from the public wishes to participate in tonight's meeting? all jump up at once. I think it's been years since anybody actually said anything. No, we're good. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Hearing nothing from the citizens in attendance. We'll move on to item 6, consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the board and will be considered by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered as part of the order of business at tonight's meeting. We have 3 items listed at CRWA 23-10-058. That's a resolution approving the meeting minutes from September 11th. CRWA 23-10-059, that is approval of the financial report and check register report until audited. And CRWA 23-10-060, that is approval of the fourth quarter FY 2023 investment reports. I am open for a motion.
President, I'd like to remove item 23-10-058. Minutes.
Sure.
Some corrections.
You can make the correction now if you'd like.
Okay. That's fine. If I can make the corrections now, I'd like the minutes to reflect on item 13, where there was a motion by Trustee Shield and seconded by myself with regards to an update on the pipeline for the October meeting.
Okay. Who is taking that note? Okay. Here's Fran has that. Anybody else have any changes to the minutes of the September 11th meeting? Hearing none, I will re-ask for a motion with adoption of 23-10-058 with as amended by Trustee Ramos. I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
I have a motion from Tracy Shields, second from Ted Gibbs. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we move on to item 7. Presentation discussion. The first one is an update on proposed Hayes Caldwell pipeline. I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Tim. In your staff notes that we've provided to you, first I wanted to point out that it's the month of October, not September, so that's just a typo. 4 of us reviewed this and all of us missed that particular month date. So anyway, the first item of discussion is an update on where we're at on the Hayes Caldwell transmission line to deliver water to the folks at County Line. And we're currently looking at 3 different routes. There's a route A and a route B and a route C. And there's a description in the notes of each route. I will just summarize that route A, which would take the water out of the plant and up along Highway 110, which is proposed to be a new road to Highway 21 or FM 21, and then up FM 21 to a connection point to County Line at Bettis Road. That particular line length is over 4 miles and is subject to, we think, a considerable number of easements that would have to be acquired. There are also some questions about whether or not we can get approval for some of these easements, which is described in here. Route B is somewhat similar. It's a further route, would take the pipeline up along Highway 80 and then hit the intersection at 21 and just take it up 21 and terminate again at Bettis Road. That's a longer line, probably about 29,000 feet roughly. Also subject to a number of easements and probably more easements that would have to be acquired. Route C is another one that we're looking at on a preliminary basis, which would take a pipeline from out of the plant up around Cemetery towards Martindale, make use of the existing Martindale connection, and then continue on around and connect eventually with the existing pipeline that we have up at, I think it's 1966. Is that right, David? 1966. That line, we're not sure of the length yet. It could be as much as anywhere from 127, excuse me, 27,000 to 30,000 feet. We're not sure yet, but there's far fewer easements that we would have to acquire. And we're at a point right now with these three different alignments that we need some assistance, advice from some easement experts to tell us what we're possibly looking at in terms of potential costs of these different routes. The easement costs are going to be substantial, and the fewer easements that we have to acquire, the less cost it would be. So we'll be coming back to the board in the future about a request for professional services from a company that can help us with the easement analysis of what we're looking at potential costs. Any questions, anybody?
Mr. Kaufman, I have a question. With regards to Route C, I appreciate all the work y'all are doing. I do like the leadership, that's being presented here. Mr. Rohan also indicated he's going to have some meetings. But with regards to Route C, the only concern or the only question I want to bring up is the statement you say where Maxwell can tie into this line through metered connections. You did provide back in July 7th of 2022, where you're asking all of Canyon Regional entities to not tie into the line. So I would ask that you remove that, not allow Maxwell to tie into that line, because there is a document that you circulated again back in July 7th of 2022 that prohibits that from occurring. So certainly we are still interested in the route, but please remove that or strike that.
Are there other questions or comments?
That FM 21 widened. Roads can be widened. How is that going to affect?
Well, if we put the pipeline in the right of way, we would have to pay to move it, which is right. So that's a huge expense to that, which makes Route C far more attractive. Correct.
But then you're going to use it. How would you do that for Route A and B?
Well, that's a very good question. I think we're just trying to be objective and come up with some reasonable cost estimates for all of the options so that we can make the best informed decision. We're not committing to do anything. It's just a matter of looking and seeing what the cost will likely be. And the fact that we would have to perhaps move the line out of the right of way has to be factored into the cost. But you're correct.
But if C is so much more attractive, then what would we do about the meter connections? Thank you. I couldn't come up with the word. How would we rescind this memo that was sent out on July 7th of 2022?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question. Could you speak into the microphone? I can hear you a little better.
Well, we have here, so this says that water delivery to these connections is not metered by CRWA, and the recipients of such service are not CRWA customers and have never made any agreement with or payment to. But anyway, it's pretty much you're saying don't allow meter connections to our water transmission mains. So that's July 7th. Would we make a amendment to this policy?
No, that would remain unchanged. What we're referring to is if Maxwell desired, it's really a function of what their interests are because we don't know their development plans. But if they wanted to make a T connection or a major pipe connection to it would be a new metering point for them. Just as we have metering points for Green Valley in this area, off transmission lines, there would be a metering point. If they chose to, that was just a question of, I can't speak for Maxwell what their interest would be, but the question is, would there be opportunity for them or anybody else to make a tap connection to it? And we would obviously consider that, but it would have to be an official metering point does that make sense? No, we're not talking about individual customer service lines for a household. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a major connection metering point to the district itself. So I don't believe there's any inconsistency with what was written in 2022. Other questions? Well, it's just to let you know that we would come back to you next month with a request for being able to hire an expert that can tell us about the land positions. What we'll probably do is contact 3 different firms at least and try to get their interest in it, see what we can come up with in terms of potential cost to evaluate it.
Of course.
Microphone?
If I can remind everybody to make sure that, just to make sure everybody's talking into a microphone, it helps with the recording. It helps with the acoustics in here, but it also helps so that when,
I think as far as Maxwell is concerned, I think Route C is going to be the most better way to go. And we have less right away to buy. I think Mabel is familiar with the pipeline over there. And I think we might have one person.
Oh, I don't know if we'd be able to share pipeline easement. Maybe there's a possibility.
That would be great. Thank you. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
but the next meeting, John, you're going to be looking for the board's agreements to get one of our right-of-way agents that we've used in the past, whether it's someone we're using currently or somebody else that's familiar with that area, to determine what the impact would be if we needed to acquire all that right-of-way, because obviously that area is pretty hot up there. I'm assuming the development is going like crazy in that area, so it's probably being measured by the square inch instead of by the square foot these days. But I think it's important to have a decent understanding of what it might, what's the impact of that besides the operational cost of building a pipeline. How bad is it going to be to try to acquire the dirt? And your point's well taken. If we put a pipeline in the right of way, it may stay there for 10 years before TxDOT does anything, or TxDOT may come out next month, right after we're finished, and announce, by the way, SH-21 is about to become a 7-lane superhighway, and you have to move everything you built on your dime because you're not in protected area. And that's a huge expense. So knowing all this stuff as you try to determine a route is critical to the success of a project, is doing the due diligence early so you don't wind up in a bad spot later, because you can really get in a bad spot real fast. You got to understand what they're up to and learn all their long-term plans so you don't build things in the wrong place, because they really don't care. They don't purvey water. They're not worried about it. It costs you double, it's on you.
Like for, excuse me, our council to look in to see what it takes to do a shared easement, or are we gonna have to go back? Their approval for this,
When you say shared easement, you're talking about with,
whoever we have to share it with. Easements are probably specific between Maxwell and
right, so
we're going to put a pipeline for somebody else in there. Have to go back, I would think, to the landowner and
you'd have to go back to both.
investigate that.
Yeah, so that's even a double whammy. So if you're going to try and tie onto someone's existing easement, there's 2 things going on. You still have a landowner issue because you're not gonna be able to put another pipeline in an easement that's a certain width unless you have more width to put a pipeline in, because you can't run them right next to each other. And then you have the fact that you're overlapping someone else's easement, and how does that work? And there are some technical issues and there's some legal issues thrown into that little pot right there.
One of the advantages of option C is that it would negate the need for a new separate line for Martindale.
We're looking at next meeting, having an item on the agenda about seeking some expert opinion on easements and right of ways in that area.
Yes.
Oh, so
Anybody
he-
have any other questions on this?
So he will not be seeking until,
I think the cost of seeking this is gonna be beyond his authority to do that, so I think we have to bring somebody in and do that.
well, I understand that. What I'm asking is, so are we not voting to say, hey, go ahead and put out an RFQ, whatever?
It is not on the agenda as an action item.
If I may just remind the board, we're gonna have a meeting with Brandon. Brandon was looking forward to having a meeting with the four entities just to talk about this whole, so just, that's still on the books at some point.
It'd be an opportunity to talk further about this,
Yes.
this group of projects and what each one brings to the table, good and bad, right?
Just as a reminder.
Because I think no matter how you're looking at this, every one of them is gonna have a bunch of upsides, and they're probably gonna have a couple downsides. It's just how you balance out your return on your investment when you're doing this, and whether you can afford to build whatever you want to stand up to do. That's what we're down to. It's money, right? Thank you, John. Update on the wheeling agreement, or is there a separate report on that?
There's a separate report in your packet, prepared by Trey Wilson on a meeting that we had concerning the wheeling agreement. I would defer you to, his remarks on that subject. I can't comment myself beyond that, unless there's anybody from Maxwell that would like to make a comment about what's going on with the wheeling agreement and any amendments to it. Doris, if you have anything you want to say, or we can just move on.
First of all, I always like. I just,
I think Trey did a good job covering what's in there. Anybody else have any questions on that item? Doris, okay if I move on to the next one? Is it okay if I move on to the next item? Thank you. Emergency preparedness, freezing weather response plan. Close and dear to my heart.
We want to be prepared, obviously, with not having generators at operating at Wells Ranch. We want to be very prepared in case we run into freezing weather conditions. And what we've documented here is what our current thoughts are on what we need to do to get ready for that. We think we have the ability to move water around certain storage tanks and pump stations if we need to. We're going to be talking with GVC again. We've already had meetings with them to discuss this. We're going to talk with their senior management people to make sure that they fully understand that we need to have power uninterrupted to our facilities. So if we run into a situation where we've got a blackout or a rolling blackout, our objective is to make sure we've got water flowing. Tanks are full, we've got water flowing all the time as much as we can. If we got power, we're not going to shut anything off. We're going to keep the water moving. So, but again, we're going to be meeting with GVC and so forth. So, and monitoring everything very, very closely. I don't want to repeat everything that's written in here, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain anything.
Backup power.
Gary, excuse me, can you move the microphone closer to Irene so
It says backup power generation was suspended in 2022 and 2023 for the Wells Ranch and the booster pump stations due to proper design. This issue is progressing toward resolution. What are y'all doing?
Irene, how about we do this? How about we do this? How about we sit down with you and kind of go over that whole story? It's about a 90-minute story in the condensed version, or about a week if you want to get into all the little pieces and parts. I'll give you the very short answer to this. Our engineers designed a project to put large scale generation out at Wells Ranch and several other locations. The engineer that designed this didn't follow what I would call established electrical engineering properties and sizing things, specifically switchgear. So we have a generator large enough to do what it needs to do. The switchgear is not big enough to carry the load for the unit. So in the event that we tried to operate that switchgear under the current conditions, our peak loads are higher than the switchgear is rated to handle, so the switchgear would fail. At this time, we backed the switchgear out of the middle of the operation and it's running without that in the way so that the plant can do what it needs to do. But the generator is sitting there and it cannot provide generation. We are working with the engineering firm on a mitigation claim that they didn't design things correctly, and we're trying to get them to reimburse us to what it's going to take to fix it. And believe me, that is the shortest version I can make of that. We've done couple hours of executive sessions on that one alone. So a new trustee, I just want you to know that there's a lot more to that story. And I appreciate you asking that question because that's a really good question. I'm glad you picked right up on that. Anybody else have any comments or questions on this?
Yes, sir.
Cooper.
It says that the EPP program is temporarily on hold due to the equipment issues. Do we have an approximate date yet on when the equipment issues will be resolved?
We have an upcoming mediation agreement with them on the 2nd of November. It's an all-day mediation. I think you're part of that.
Good to know.
Steve, I think you were invited.
Was I?
I think you responded yes.
And you said you'd be there.
Did I? Oh, well, anyway, so the meeting is on the mediation of the cost of the equipment repair or replacement. But my question is, what is the potential completion date of getting it repaired, getting it fixed?
I would say, given the fact that the engineers have told us, more than one engineer has said that basically switchgear is going to be a 56 to 62 week wait. You're looking at a 1 year wait once we can get everything moving in the right direction. I think on the November 2nd meeting, if we can find out how much the insurance company is willing to assist possibly with this, so this isn't a CRWA funded issue, it's being funded by those that didn't meet the requirements of what we needed. And that's what the mediation's about. We're trying to come up with a settlement so we can work this forward. Their complaint is that they think the cost to repair is higher than it should be. Our expert has gone through this nuts, bolts, pieces, parts, and everything else, and he's pretty confident in his numbers. So that's really where we're going.
Thank you. So we've got a pass from TCEQ on implementation of the backup power plan.
I'm going to say we probably don't have a pass, but we can probably tell them that we're in the process of doing this and we have an electrical engineering problem and we're working to resolve it. And we'll let them know when it's finished, and that'll be our pass because it's really the only thing we can do. They're not going to penalize us for trying to fix the problem. They would penalize us if we ignored them and didn't do anything. And I think by everything you've seen occurring, there isn't any way anybody would say we didn't do something or tried to resolve the problem. I think the actions taken by this board and by engineers and everybody else would pretty much clearly indicate that we took this matter very seriously and we're working to resolve it as rapidly as we possibly can within the confines of funding.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And it's important to note on this conversation, the city of Cibolo did reach out to GVEC, to their general manager, Darren Shower, right after we had the big freeze. And our conversation with him was that somehow or another, they have to work out within their distribution system that there are some items that truly are critical infrastructure, and to cause a second calamity by not understanding that is really unconscionable. There are several of us here that ran out of water. Not because I couldn't deliver water to anybody, it's because CRWA couldn't move water from A to B. And when we explained how a plant works, and this plant here specifically, if you shut it off suddenly from power generation, you just shut it off. It doesn't start right back up. Staff has to take the plant offline and then bring it back up incrementally. David, am I saying that wrong? You have to bring it back incrementally, and before you start moving water, you have to test the water you're generating before it goes out the door, which takes about 45 minutes to an hour to bring the plant back online, which was just about the time the power went back off again. They didn't realize that that's what they were doing until we went into great detail with them. And when we shared that with them, they're like, well, we probably need to do something different then, because literally the water shortage problem was only a power generation issue. It was never a water issue. It was caused by others. And the pressure the GVEC took, and actually they came and apologized to our city council for some of the things that happened. I don't know if they made the apology toward anybody else, but they did to us. Because I was pretty hard on him the one day, because he was on the phone with me telling me there's no way we're turning the power off to your plants. And I said, that's funny. I'm talking to Adam, the operations manager, and he's standing at Wagner booster station and the power's off. So if you're telling me the power's on, you've got a bigger problem over here. And he called back about an hour later and said, I was mistaken. Apparently we are turning the power off to your critical infrastructure, and we're trying to figure out how not to do that after it's all done. Green Valley knows it took you guys 5 days to get back up off boil water. Took us 3 days to get back up off boil water. It was never a water problem, power problem. That's how important generators are. Kidding. Any other questions on this? And I appreciate the fact people are asking questions. That tells me people are reading things. Where are we at next? Risk and resilience assessment, cybersecurity policy. Mr. Koff.
So we have to update our risk and resiliency assessment. It has to be completed by the end of this coming year, as required by the American Water Infrastructure Act. Isn't that correct, Adam?
AWIA. that's
AWA,
correct.
right. And then in addition to that, we have to prepare a cybersecurity policy that we plan to route through the policy committee. This is a highly confidential, secure policy that we have to keep here, so only certain eyes can be on it to review it. It is something that is highly regulated by EPA, the FBI, and Homeland Security. We will be working on that very diligently. We would like to use the same consultants that we used last time to create the risk and resiliency assessment and to prepare the policy. They did an excellent job, and we'd like to use them again. They're very familiar with the requirements of both the policymaking as well as the risk and resiliency assessment update. Adam, is there anything you would like to add to that? Come on up. I have asked Adam to come on up. Adam has been coordinating all of this work, and we will be coming to you next time for approval to use CPNY now. They're called
STP.
STP. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Herholzer to work on this. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, just so you all know that the major component in Canyon Regional that was identified as a fairly large deficiency was in our cybersecurity, and how robust it was. So there are physical elements that have been mostly taken care of underneath the first 5 years after the risk and resilience assessment was completed. We have a 5-year period to get certain things done. The physical components are done. One of the last major things that we have to do is actually produce policies on cybersecurity and SCADA use. SCADA is a computer that runs all of Canyon Regional stuff, and just computer use and everything on computers, emails, that sort of thing. So We are wanting to acquire this engineering firm to help us produce these policies so that we can meet the deadline.
The deadline was the end of this year, 2023. So we
No, at the end of 2024.
end of 2024.
Yes.
Yeah, it's more like
You're
March.
saying 2.5 months to get this
Yeah,
done.
no,
No,
it's,
no, no, no.
it's March of 2025 is when the deadline is due.
Okay, thank
So-
you.
So we would want to prepare a draft for internal review and then leave enough time to get it submitted on time.
Thank you.
And if anybody here hasn't worked on one of these are considered so secure that basically it's not even subject to open records request. This is literally at the same level as an attorney-client privilege document. And it's supposed to be literally like eyes only. Because essentially it tells how your system runs and it basically gives you a blueprint of your vulnerabilities and where someone could use that as a tool against you. That's why it's pretty important not to have it out in the open. I know that all the big entities are doing them at a different time than the smaller entities. We just had to do ours 2 years ago, and it's good for 5 years. And there's a lot to it. It's not a simple deal. Anybody have questions on that one? Report from the general manager on open positions.
Okay, we have advertised since around mid-September for 2 open positions, assistant general manager and project engineer. We've only gotten one response resume from a potential candidate for the open position of assistant general manager. That resume just didn't meet anything close to the qualifications that we were requesting. We're not getting much response so far from all of those that we've advertised through, including AWWA, Texas Rural Water, and so forth. So what we would like to do is use the services of a headhunter who we've used in the past. That's also an agenda item in here for approval. To use SGR, the firm here in Texas to assist with that recruiting and so forth. Lou, is there anything you want to add to that or no? At this time, or you want to take comments later on? Take comments later, okay. I think we need some help with that. We're just not getting response on our advertisement. Okay.
Any questions on that one? Next one is status of RFQ for general counsel.
This is something that I've been working on. I put it off for a little bit because we got too busy on too many other priority projects. I'm taking it up again. I expect to have it a draft to the executive committee by next week. So we'll come on that, but it is in progress. And thanks to Lou for providing useful information as input to it. Thank you.
Any questions or concerns on that one? Next one is PFAS, class action litigation, update from general manager.
Okay, this is a rather involved topic. I'm going to start it off and then I'm going to turn it over to Lou to kind of fill in the color commentary about the class action suit. Provided in here is some background information about PFAS, what it is, how we're being regulated, and so on and so forth. And we've picked up a little bit of some PFAS chemicals here at Lake Dunlap and at Hayes Caldwell. Nothing to be concerned about. They're just part of the list of 29 chemicals that have been identified by EPA for further study. They're not being regulated at this time, and what we found were very minor in terms of constituents. But more monitoring is probably going to be required in the future. We do have a facility next to us, which is a firefighting training facility. I have no idea, and I don't know that staff has any idea if any firefighting foams were used at that facility in the past. We just don't know. But that's a potential source of contamination, which is right next door to us, obviously of concern, potentially. But with regard to some ongoing class action litigation that is in the process of being settled out of court, we've been invited to participate in that class action suit, and I'm going to turn it over to Lou, who will give you all of the nuances of what this is about.
Okay, can I be heard? I think I can. PFAS is a technical term that I do not understand, but the easiest way I've found to understand it is if you think about the Teflon on your pans that you have in the kitchen, the material or the chemical that gives you that sliding no stick food capacity is a form of a PFAS chemical. That chemical plus a lot of plastics and other chemicals are in the process of being regulated by the US EPA. That preliminary regulation came out in late June, if my memory is correct. What the handout that I put on the table there and was sent to John earlier basically covers is a firm that's called the Napoli firm, and you should have something in your handout that looks a bit like this. And the bright blue. And what the firm has done, they've traced their days of environmental litigation back to 9/11 and the asbestos and other problems that arose out of the 9/11 towers going down. And the firm's capabilities are set forth in the back of the literature that I tried to get to you. But basically, what we have coming from the EPA is there's an unregulated contaminant monitoring rule that's forthcoming. There's some research on health alert for children. There's a great deal of information coming out. It includes problems that deal with testicular cancer, thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis, bladder cancer, blood cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, and so forth. And all of these are very small chemical components that are not removed in the waste treatment plants. If it goes through a waste treatment plant, and they ultimately end up in your water system in very, very, very small quantities. But the cumulative effect of this is thought to be very deleterious or very damaging. So what is proposed is the firm reached out to Mr. Kaufman earlier this year and asked if he would be willing to join a class action suit. And so what you have is a handout, and in the October 10th letter to Mr. Kaufman, I basically provided the media package, which is the colored materials you have before you, and some background behind this. And what they're asking us to do is to join a nationwide, or what's called a multi-district federal court lawsuit. So I ask you to think about the cigarette litigation, the litigation that involved asbestos, some other kinds of litigation which established trust funds for the remediation. In this case, they've announced a settlement with 3M, and they're looking for settlements against other companies. And what they're trying to do is take the chemicals out of the system so that you don't have to deal with them in your water systems. There is a provision in the Texas Government Code, and I hate to say this to Mr. Gibbs, but this is something we didn't talk about in procurement. But in the event you do a class action suit or join a class action suit, there is a requirement for reporting to the state about that. What I'm recommending tonight is that you take this material and make it a study assignment, and that we bring this back to the board with a recommendation. In my recommendation to the president and members of the executive committee, I recommended that the general manager, staff, and a committee of the board to be appointed by the president give this matter further consideration. The real problem is that we know a fairly small amount about the problem. EPA is yet to give us a final rule, but we know the rule is coming. And the idea behind the class action lawsuit is try to prevent as much of the damage before it occurs as you can. we at this place would not be funding the litigation. It's contingent on recovering against 3M, DuPont, the big boys that are producing the chemicals. And it's a class action suit. I'm trying to think of the most recent class action suit that went against, it's not a class action perfect parallel, but the antitrust suit that was filed against Google just recently. Typically, it involves multi-state attorney generals. It involves multi-state litigants. It could involve the city of Cibolo. It could involve Marion. It could involve all of us. But the thought here is that we need to know more about this. I've not had a chance to have face time with anybody. I've not had a chance to have telephone time with anybody. It's all been stuff that's come to me by computer. I'm not comfortable with that level of knowledge. So what I'm asking you to do is to look at the material. I'm asking the president to appoint a committee to help us figure out how we respond to it. There have been settlements that are listed on one of the last pages of this handout that you have. And so it's widely known that these contaminants are detrimental, and they've settled these with rather sizable settlements, 17 million being one, 12.5 billion being the other, et cetera. So Mr. Kaufman's got this in his report. This is an information item that I'm trying to elaborate on. Mr. President, I don't have a lot of other stuff that I want to say tonight other than hiring a firm on a contingency fee basis means we do not spend any money from Canyon Regional. The other concern that I have is that when we address this issue, we make sure that the firm that's soliciting participation not go to our member entities and set member entities up against each other because the water's being produced by Canyon, that we make sure they know we're all one entity so that they're not cross purposes here, and that we proceed from there. But there is a distinct process that this litigation would go on for a year to 2 to 3 to 4 years. And we would not be paying for any of this. The credentials for the Napoli Shikolnik firm are listed here, and there's a retainer agreement included in the back end of the package so that you can see how the fee percentage splits, and it's a 25% fee for the law firm if they prevail. And I think I've said what I need to say. Mr. Foos?
I thought I read somewhere, and I can't find it right now, that there are small traces of this in.
All traces, yes.
Yes, if you read what is in the notes that I provided to you, and this was reported previously, that we found, well, actually it was TCEQ that did the sampling at all 3 plants. At Lake Dunlap and at Hayes Caldwell, they found very, very minor amounts of PFAS chemicals that are listed in the 29 required for us to monitor. Those are not regulated yet at this time. And the concentrations we came up with were just slightly above the
Detectable level.
well, not detectable, but reporting level. So they're really, really small. And the chemicals, I did some research on them, they appear to be surfactants used in some sort of manufacturing or industry. And presumably they came to us from the upstream wastewater plants.
Chemical that's been widely used, firefighting white foam, and it has one of the chemicals. Airports across the country have been. Problem is that.
As part of that, just so everybody knows, you'd say, well, there's no big airports that close to where we get our water from. And I'm going to tell you, I disagree, and here's why. Every one of the small airports that are owned now by a city, New Braunfels, San Marcos, the airport in Seguin, Zool Airport down there in Medina, in our county, in Guadalupe County. All of these airports were originally Army Air Force bases from World War II. And most of them were operated through the Korean War, some into the Vietnam War era, but a lot of them were operated in that time. And during that time, the military frequently did burn fire exercises where they literally mixed a mixture of waste oil, jet fuel, and gasoline and made this slurry, put it in a ditch and set it on fire, and then told the firefighters go put it out with foam. So that AFFF, aqueous film forming foam, that is now turned out to be quite hazardous to human exposure over long periods of time. They were spraying that everywhere, on the ramps, on the ground. They were just spraying it everywhere, not knowing the long-term effect. Well, now it turns out we're figuring out what the long-term effect is, and it's lawsuits and what's going to happen next. The PFAS is separate from that, but there are chemical constituencies in the AFFF and the PFAS, which are very similar in molecular structure, and these are where these things are coming from. They're looking for this everywhere at this point in time. And I can tell you, you'd think it wouldn't be in the area, but when you talk about Hayes Caldwell, you have two airports going that direction, that both of those had military operations into the 50s there, and they were spraying that foam everywhere. That's how it gets into the water. And it's another one of those chemicals. It turns out it's got a pretty good lifespan. It doesn't really break down ecologically. It slowly degrades, but it turns out it hangs around for a while, and that's how it's winding up in trace amounts in the water.
My experience with class action lawsuits, nothing ever good comes out of them. The lawyers get all the money.
That's funny, because that's exactly what Trey Wilson said, the lawyer. He said the only person that really does well in these things is the lawyer that started it, and everybody else kind of gets in line to get their 15 cents.
By the time it gets down to the participants, you might get 10 cents out of it. I would like for the lawyers to give us the pros and cons.
I think at the next meeting, we can ask Trey and Lou both basically look at this and tell us, should we get involved? If we get involved, what's our risk? Because anytime you sign up and you become one of these part of a lawsuit, there's always going to be some small amount of risk where, you're an early antagonist on one of these lawsuits and maybe it has a downside. I don't know what that could be, but I'm telling you, normally there's a downside to them. And
Nothing is free.
and it may be that you signed away your rights for something else in the future. And being a water purveyor, it might put us in the middle between all the entities that are using water, and suddenly Canyon Regional was part of the lawsuit originally. And how does that all play out? And I raised that with Trey when I talked about that. I said, you got to be cautious with these things, because I could tell you that the city of Cibolo is being also from a different law firm asking us to sign on to a PFAS thing, blaming the water companies for bringing the PFAS to us. So before anybody jumps into this, make sure you know what you're getting involved in. Just saying.
Exactly why I don't want.
Stephen,
An observation, Martindale is down gradient from the San Marcos Airport, which used to be Camp Gary, an
Yeah.
Army Air Base from 1942. But we received a letter in July from the EPA that no PFAS were detected in Martindale's system, which is unusual because we receive about half of our water from the Hayes Caldwell water treatment plant, but maybe the dilution factor.
it could very well be, and it may, you got to remember, there's a minimum level and there's a detection level, and it may just be that the day they took that, your mix was at a point where you were below any detectable level that was reportable. So they said, well, it's not reporting.
Apparently so.
But we know that at the Hayes Caldwell plant, we're just at the report level, but it's not an EPA managed number yet. I think they're walking that direction pretty rapidly right now, as they have with copper and lead and other things. You can see it coming, but right now there's no action item on it, or it's not an actionable item yet, but I'm assuming not too far down the road, there'll be an action item, and it'll be, how do you get that out of the water? That'll be the next thing. Some engineers have to figure out how you strain that out somehow, whether it's charcoal or some other thing, 'cause it's going to have to, it's a mineral. So we got to get it out of there, I guess.
The other, wanted to ask Adam, maybe it's mentions nanofiltration and ozone as a possible treatment process. for these contaminants.
Filters clogged. That'll be the next thing coming down the pike.
Well, microfiltration or nanofiltration are recommended tools to be able to use to filter out a lot of PFAS. The problem is that once you do filter it out, how do you destroy it? Because this plant right here, we recycle most of our water through the plant, so there's hardly any discharge from this plant. And so we get PFAS in our recycle stream, and we're only going to build it up in our own system. So that's the issue is once you remove it with filters, then you have to destruct it somehow. And there's a couple of different treatment methods that they can do that with. You can either have it hauled off somewhere and they destroy it, or there's different epoxies. There's a type of epoxy that actually works. I think I'm right on that, right, John? It's kind of like an ion exchange, I think.
I'm not familiar with the epoxy technology, but anytime you end up with a residual that's got a hazardous substance in it, especially that's concentrated, then we come under a whole new set of regulations for having to dispose of a hazardous waste.
As a solid or as a byproduct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and just so that y'all know that once EPA kind of has something on their radar that they have you monitoring, it more than likely will become a regulation in the future. So that's something that we need to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Then there'll be large landfills out somewhere filled up with all this PFAS stuff that'll have to be put in lead linings or what, I mean, it's a whole new industry's coming up here.
Our water system is 100 years.
I don't mean to make light of it, but you can see where, it just becomes a whole nother expense to run in a water system. It could be a big one. Anybody else have any questions before we slide on past that? Let's do H.
Okay, a little bit of good news on PFAS. You may recall back in June, we filed an application for a grant to study under the Emerging Contaminants program, how we might be able to remove any PFAS that we might find in our water. And so we came up with an idea of trying to not just filter it, but rather obliterate it so that it doesn't become a hazardous substance that we have to dispose of. And we thought of an idea of using ozone and a catalyst, ferric oxide catalyst, which has apparently been documented as something that works. So we filed an application to do a bench scale pilot testing of that technology here at Lake Dunlap. And we were informed recently by our consultant, CPNY, now SDV, that we in fact did qualify to pursue the grant funding, which we made a request initially of $2 million. So we are now graduated to the next level, and in the process, I don't know exactly what that means yet or how much money we would get, but we're not out of the running. And as far as we know what we've been told, we will probably get something to do, some testing here at Lake Dunlap to obliterate this stuff if we find it. More to come on this.
So it's serious enough. There's already grants out there, multi-million-dollar grants on what to do with it. Looks like we're in the running to receive a $2 million grant, and how we're going to get it out of our system. That's the good news. Last one up there, nanostone membrane performance and potential settlement of dispute with nanostone. Sir.
Okay, thank you. Last but not least, we've made great strides so far this year, particularly this summer, in getting the maximum amount of water out of Lake Dunlap. We've been trying to push them real hard to see just exactly how much we can push out of the membranes. And we've been, in this summer, our production out of this plant has been ranging between 13 and a little bit more than 14 MGD. Now the water's been a bit on the warm side, which does make a difference when it comes to viscosity. But with all of that, we've determined internally that we think that if we make a correction to 20 degrees Celsius, that would need about 2 more racks or about 88 total modules additional here at Lake Dunlap to get us to 14.4 MGD at 20 degrees Celsius. That's what we would be recommending now. What we would like to do is use a consultant to help us evaluate that. Check our numbers, our equations, our spreadsheets and so forth, and make sure that we're on the right track. We are currently owe 3 payments to Nanostone, and the total amount right now is $289,426.62. And they are willing to give us the membranes that we need free of charge. They just want to be paid what we owe them. I don't know that we want to be in a lawsuit with Nanostone over this, especially since we've made great strides in our pretreatment system here at Lake Dunlap, thanks to the folks here at the facility who've done great work on making that happen. Lou, is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
Mr. President, I want to make a comment or an observation. I asked that if we're going to engage Garver, I believe Garver be the engineer, that there be an independent analysis of Garver, not the staff's numbers, because if you recall, the staff did bring numbers to this board at 79 or 88 or something like that. Then they jumped up to 198, and then now they're down to 88. I think it behooves this board to let Garver do an independent study to see what that number is and go off of that number, as opposed to analysis by staff using flux rates, which y'all went through, using equations and realizing they used the wrong equation. So again, I just want to reiterate to this board that, the point taken here is you want to avoid litigation. The best result would be from an engineer that can stamp a report saying it's done by an engineer, and these are the numbers.
Thank you, Humberto. Anybody else have any comments? Hearing none, we're going to move on to CRWA staff reports. Canyon Lake level and drought report, staff.
Okay, everything is in our staff report that we gave you as a handout and submitted to you recently. I would like to just point out there's a spelling correction on page 6 at the bottom where we identify property owner as being the Beatty family. It's misspelled. I was given wrong information when this was typed. The correct spelling is Batey. That's at the bottom of page 6 in your handout. And also on page 8 at the top, under Gonzales County Underground Water Conservation District, the hearing was originally reported to me to be tentatively scheduled for the 2nd. It has actually been established it'll be on the 8th of November instead of the 2nd of November. So that also coincides with the Board of Managers meeting, but this is a hearing to determine standing in our case. It's a contested case. Other than that, I have nothing else to add from the notes that are presented in here.
Opportunity to lease. Department's the lawyer, I think.
Sue is the lawyer, and she is also interested in leasing us groundwater. Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Moving on to B, water treatment, storage and transmission operations staff.
All of our information is in the handout and the report. I would be happy to answer any questions. I think you all have handouts that show water production through September from all of the plants, not just Lake Dunlap.
Questions on B? Hearing none, we'll move on to C, Wells Ranch 3 project, staff.
Everything we have is in the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on that one? And on, we'll go to letter D, South Texas Regional Water Planning Group, Region L.
Everything I have is in here under paragraph D on page 7. I've been happy to answer any questions. That.
Hearing no questions, we'll move on to the Guadalupe River Habitat Conservation Plan.
Nothing to add. We just had our first recent meeting that was attended largely by U.S. Fish and Wildlife folks and folks from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. There were a few utilities there. There's another meeting planned in the future, hasn't yet been scheduled.
Any questions on the Guadalupe River HCP? Hearing none, we'll move over to the groundwater districts of Guadalupe and Gonzales counties.
I have nothing to add than other than what's in the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Hearing none, we're going to move over to G, legal and legislative matters. A quick update from Lou. There.
Just for the sake of a quick update, I've been working with Mr. Gibbs in the policy committee and will continue to do that. He has tonight one presentation here, and I'll not take time to cover that. Other than that, I've been working with this PFAS issue and other jobs as Mr. Kaufman may assign. Trey's handling the bulk of the other activities with the electrical problem on your generators and the Hayes Caldwell matters. I'm still waiting for the report and whatever, but I'm still at your service, sir.
Yes, sir. Any questions on legal and legislative matters? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to item 9, CRWA committee reports. First one is the budget committee. Anna, you have anything to report?
I do not.
Hearing none. Policy and legislative committees, Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, sir. Okay, tonight we have the bylaws ready for discussion and potentially a vote. Next on the list is the personnel policy is currently being made some minor edits on by staff, and then it'll go for one more final legal review, and then that'll come before the Board of Trustees, hopefully soon. Next up on the agenda, tuition reimbursement. We're going to go through that. We need to go back through the entire admin policy and make sure that it matches up to all the policy changes that we've created and made to make sure that's buttoned down. And then after that, we've finished with the policies and we'll start on the legislative potential updates.
Any questions from Mr. Gibbs and Policy and Legislative Committee? And as he noted, we do have an action item on the agenda further down. Hearing none, we'll move on to Construction Committee and reports on matters related to CRWA construction infrastructure projects. And this time, Brandon sent me the report, so I'm going to read his report to you all. Construction Committee and Board of Managers are moving their meeting dates. Construction Committee will now meet on the last Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. The Board of Managers will meet on Wednesdays prior to the Board of Trustees meeting at 10 a.m. In recent years, the Board of Managers has shifted from providing support to the Board of Trustees meeting to discuss action of the Board of Trustees is already taken. My hope is that bringing the Construction Committee before the Board of Managers will allow recommendations from that committee to be heard at the Board of Managers. Will allow the Board of Managers a chance to ask questions and better understand the topics and relay that information to their respective trustees. In the past, the Board of Trustees would hear recommendations from the Board of Managers and at times recommendations from both the committee and managers on the same topic. Welcome that change. I think that'll streamline how that operates. The CRWA staff presented several discussion items to the committee. Region L's consultant has reached out to CRWA staff to verify information related to Wells Ranch 3, the Lake Dunlap expansion, the Hayes Caldwell, and Siesta projects. Staff are working on answering their questions. Selection committee was formed to evaluate statements of qualifications related to the Lake Dunlap water treatment plant. Selection committee met several times and interviewed 4 of the 6 respondents. Out of the 6, they selected Garber as their recommendation. Staff believes they have determined the final number of ceramic modules necessary for Lake Dunlap. The current plan is to allow Lake Dunlap RFQ selected firm to independently come up with that number and confirm that decision. UEG continues to work on a TxDOT relocation project. Construction window for the project is anticipated to be 120 days. Gallegos Engineering is working on a pipeline alignment for the Hayes Caldwell transmission line. We've heard that report earlier. CLSUD, that's county line, and others have asked for my help in leading the discussion related to funding. I've been working with CRWA staff to gather the historical information related to the facility to better understand the mechanisms that led to the Maxwell Wheeling Agreement. The agreement allows Maxwell to cancel the agreement with notice and revoke the allocation of water through their own distribution system. Maxwell has provided notice that they are revoking that allocation. CRWA staff, Trey, our attorney, and I met with Maxwell to discuss a temporary agreement that addresses the deficiencies in the original agreement. This temporary agreement will not take the place of the construction of a pipeline. It will only allow for the continued transport of water through Maxwell's system while alternative delivery means are being approximately 900 acre feet that CRWA requested in the Gonzales County UWCD is going to a contested case hearing. And if anybody's been a part of one of those, that just basically means it's another hole to throw money in. Lawyers and all kinds of experts and everything else. It's just gonna be another expense related to that. That is Brandon's report. Or any questions on Brandon's report? I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to answer any questions, but I'm gonna allow you to ask him anyway, because I'm reading it. He always does a great job typing these out. It's great when he actually gives them to me to read when he's not here.
Could you forward a copy of that to Hannah? Administrative assistant?
I can.
Thank you.
Watch this. Should do it right now while I've got that thing open. I know what happens if I walk out of here. It'll be the last I remember that. Next up, project updates from and written reports by our engineering consultant, staff, and others. First one is Alliance Regional Water Authority participation. Graham, how are you? Any question for Graham Moore in relation to the Alliance Water?
Graham, I'm just gonna. Segment C. So it just seems like this keeps getting further and further away from us. Okay.
Any other questions for Graham Moore related to the Alliance Regional Water Alliance? Excellent. Next one up is GIS system, and this one's going to come from David Kniper at UEG and staff. David, do you have anything to add?
Part of the GIS system, nothing additional to that.
Do you have any questions for David Kniper in relation to the GIS system? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next one, the TxDOT CRWA IH10. That's at Santa Clara and Zool pipeline encasements. David? Thank you, David. Off the top of your head, do you remember what the reimbursement ratio was on that? Standing. Good on that one, huh? Next one, TxDOT CRWA FM 1518 transmission line project. David. Any questions for David on this one? And our reimbursement ratio on that one is? We're eating 80% and they're paying 20%.
better.
This goes back to.
That's why I asked about the ratio, because I knew what the next one was gonna look like.
Better.
That's exactly what that goes back to. That's what happens when you build things in state-owned property. When they decide to take the property back, it's on you. Next one is CRWA standards and specifications. David, I think that one's yours as well. Any questions for David on CRWA standards and specifications? Hearing none. Next one. Thank you, David. Next one is CRWA master plan update. David Borrego. Any questions on the master plan update? Thank you, David. Hearing none. Next one's Wells Ranch 3 water treatment plant optimization and conceptual pipeline designs. David? This coming Friday. Okay, so the report will be here this coming Friday. Thank you. Let's see, next one. Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant Facility Improvements. First one is membrane filter replacements, Ardora. Do we have anybody from Ardora here tonight? Byron's sick. Stay home. All right, so anybody have any questions on that? Not that the consultant is here, but the report is in the book. Hearing no other comments, we'll move on to item 10, general business. Next one is CRWA 2310-061 concerning approval of the amendments to the CRWA bylaws. That's Policy and Legislative Committee Chair. That's Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs, can you walk us through this, please?
Yes, I will. We sent out the final copy 7 days ago as required, and we highlighted in yellow the substantive changes for your review so that you could focus on what was changed. And are there any questions?
Any questions related to the bylaw changes? And I want to thank this committee for the extensive amount of work they did doing all this. It has been an extraordinary long process, but I have to tell you, it's also been a thorough process.
Ace, you're not here. But it doesn't really say that he.
No, we did not add that because it's if they're taking over the position, they're taking over the duties. So there was no need to add it.
I know that after you asked the question, I did ask Trey in reference to that, and I also asked Lou, and both of them felt the same way, that the language there fully conveys my authority to the vice president in my absence. Just like when Albert became sick and I had to take over, that, initially I was like, what is my role here? And essentially it is the president of the organization in the absence of the elected president.
In lieu of.
In lieu of.
Trey was not here at our last meeting. I think Arthur, you remember which?
Yes, Doris. So section 301, there's a question on 301, and there's also a question on 405. So with regards to section 301, we met on September 26, and we left with understanding that it was gonna be edited up to eligibility. Let me see them. Board reserves the right to verify trustees' eligibility, and it was gonna stop there. Subsequently, these other two sentences, based on the Enabling Act, does not allow that to happen. The Board of Trustees of Canyon Regional cannot remove a member of an entity. And we asked that be looked at, and we weren't given any insight. Based on what I've looked into, based into the Enabling Act and based into what we have here, this goes against the Enabling Act. And so the concern is these last two sentences where it starts with if the trustee and to remove the trustee should not be here. That's a concern because we didn't discuss this on the 26th. The other issue I have,
Wait a minute, before we go to the other issue, let's talk about the first issue and make sure we understand. So you're saying the last two sentences of that highlighted area is in contrary to what are enabling?
correct.
So we've already taken that action in the past. If a trustee is found to not meet the qualifications for a trustee, President of Board of Trustees will request a replacement from the member entity, and that's actually come up before.
We haven't taken action. When have we taken action?
That doesn't say take action. All it said is we would request a replacement. There's no action in there other than asking the member entity to take action. We're not removing anybody. If the member entity refuses to take action as required under the bylaws, then we would be forced to, because you can't have someone sit here that's not eligible.
No, I understand. I understand. And we had a discussion, I believe, at this board, and we also had a discussion at the policy committee with regards to previous incidences that occurred. And the thought process was to open up the enabling legislation, which we felt wasn't the route to go. And what it's stating here, if I may, what it's stating here is the board can take a vote to remove someone from the board, and you can't do that. All I'm asking for is some clarification from the attorneys, and we didn't get that.
We did discuss that. I think you'd already left by that time. We did discuss that in great detail, and this is exactly where we came down on.
I'm fine that was discussed, but legally, can you do that? That's the only question I'm asking.
Who was
My-
the attorney at that time, correct? Where's Trey at that meeting?
I don't know if there's.
Lou was
at
that meeting.
Lou.
I was there.
Lou?
And the answer is most governing bodies per Robert's Rules of Order have got the authority to check and recheck and determine their membership. That's the concept here.
Attorney says it's okay.
We had an opinion from the attorney that it was okay. We left it as is.
And you had a question on section 4?
That's fine. Section 401, 405 with regards to the general manager. So something that's not highlighted here that wasn't in, that should be highlighted here is section of the sentence starting with an evaluation of general manager shall be conducted by the executive committee with input by the board of trustees at least annually. The heartburn here is that when we have the employee handbook, the handbook does not state that. So the thought process when we talked about this was to basically, if there is an executive committee, we also ask that the board of trustees conduct evaluation at least annually. The inference to input minimizes the board of trustees' role in this sentence, I feel. If you look at the employee handbook, and we did a lot of work, and thank you, Regina, for looking into others, how they do this. She was able to take some information from another entity and put it into the employee handbook. And the employee handbook pretty much states that the board of trustees will do that evaluation in conjunction, I believe, with the executive committee. I just don't like the word input. And remove the word input and just provide the executive committee with the board of trustees at least annually. But this was something that should be highlighted because again, this is not, previous bylaws stated just executive committee. And in order to be consistent with the employee handbook, which talks about the evaluation, ask that the word input be removed.
I
Input by.
think what we're doing here is I think the employee manual is subservient to the bylaws. My opinion, I'm not a lawyer.
That is correct.
So when we adopt the bylaws set the rules, how the organization will operate. Anything subservient to that, which would be a policy or a personnel manual or anything else, would be subservient to this document, because this is basically your charter. It's exactly how a city operates. You have a charter, and the charter tells you what you can and cannot do within the law. And in this case, I mean, I got to tell you, the executive committee wants the input of the board of trustees annually to do a review of the general manager. The executive committee does not want to be the be all end all on evaluation general manager. We don't
that-
want that level of
And
responsibility.
that's the way the detail is in the employee handbook.
And that's how the new employee handbook shows it. And that's what we want.
But you just referenced that the employee handbook is subservient to this. I believe that's what you stated. So I would ask again that the word input just be removed. I hear what you're saying. I just have heartburn because that wasn't discussed.
I could be wrong here, but I believe that the board several months ago had this discussion and we directed the committee to put this wording in here because we did not want the board to have control over, and we wanted to have a smaller group, the executive committee, do the evaluation.
Make a recommendation to the
And-
trustees and then the trustees
Exactly.
would ratify that decision.
So this was discussed at a previous meeting and given direction to.
Yeah.
you to put this language in there.
Anybody else have any, for brevity here, I want to try and keep rolling up, so we're gonna be here all night. Anybody else have any questions in reference to the changes or additions or deletions to, I believe anything that was deleted was also highlighted in yellow. So this is basically the final draft.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
on item 309, items 1 and 2, there's a reference to section 3 at the first and the second of those parentheticals.
Yep.
If you will look over at Article 3, that's section 301, and I have been trained by Ms. Stubing to be very observant of how we punctuate, and I would suggest that 3 should be 3.1 and 3.1. It's a very minor edit. And Mr. Gibbs, I apologize to you, sir, for not seeing that sooner.
Looking at 309.
Go down to the second and third paragraph. There's a reference to section 3 2 times.
Oh, okay, I see.
And then flip over 2 pages and go back to Article Roman 3. And the first section there under is 3.01. And all I'm trying to do is tie the reference.
So you're saying there should be as required in section 3.01, not just section 3.
Yes, sir.
3.01 for both of them?
Yes.
And I thought you changed it to 3 to keep it our section. That's
Yeah.
why I think you changed it to 3. 01, 02 and all that. I thought it was
Right.
for the entire section.
Our section.
I don't think it should be changed to point.
It may not need to be changed. I think they wanted to refer to the entire section, not just section 3.01. So maybe that is correct, leaving it as 3.
If you want to refer to the entire section, it's correct.
Okay.
Not incorrect.
All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments on reference to the bylaws and the work that was done?
304 attendance. A. Is there an S in front of any, or I might not have the most current?
There's an S there. We can have that removed. That is
Take that out.
that is a Scrivener's error. That can be corrected without any challenge here. Good catch. I know. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Where? We actually made that decision after we did the bylaws, so we just need to catch up.
That can come back at another meeting too. I'm not done doing this. I mean, the committee's still standing and working, so if there's needs to be another adjustment on something we catch, it can be corrected. Anybody else, Mr. Cooper?
Yes, thank you. I verbalized a concern to staff and looking for clarification on section 4.04 regarding the treasurer. The first sentence describes the duties of the treasurer to set rates for water and to ensure how the rates are based. It doesn't talk about the implementation of those rates being left up to the board or the treasurer. It just says that they're responsible to develop the rates. Is there a portion that I'm missing in the bylaws about how to implement cost changes or rate increases?
Not in the bylaws, but it'd be in the process for how we do a budget. We'll get into that level of detail in the bylaws.
Yeah, there's nobody here can
Yeah,
adopt the budget.
absolutely. And that was my concern, that it wasn't verbalized here.
And I
So
think what's
that was all.
happening is that we're trying to clean up all the other documents that regulate how we develop budgets and everything else, so all this stuff lines up. But I appreciate you bringing that up. Pretty complex organization we got running here. It just doesn't look like it till you pull the bylaws out. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'm willing to accept a motion if a motion is appropriate.
Bylaw that's presented with the typos.
I have a motion from Regina Frankie and I have a second from Berto. Thank you very much. Because of the nature of this, I'm going to take a roll vote if that's okay with everybody. Ms. Frankie,
Yes.
Mr. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Fonville, Mr. Forcell, Ms. Vaughn, Ms. Stubing, Irene, Mr. Gilbert, Mr. Gibbs.
Aye.
Mr. Ramos. Shield. Gilbert. Mr. Schwinn. Yeah. I vote aye too, so it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Gibbs, thank you very much for your efforts so far, but apparently we have a little bit further to go.
Thank you for the committee, a ton of hard work. Appreciate all the input.
I would agree that this is like rewriting a city charter. I can tell you that is a very difficult thing to do. Nuances in language, always a challenge, but I appreciate all the work. I truly do. All right, moving on. B, CRWA 2310-062 concerning ratification of New Gen Strategies contract, adopt resolution 2310-062 approving the general manager's execution of contract with New Gen Strategies concerning an updated analysis for establishing rates related to the 2021 Hayes Caldwell Water Supply and Treatment Agreement at a cost not to exceed $12,500. This is an action that we told the general manager to do, and this is just a ratification of that action.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Gibbs. Do I have a second?
Mr. Ramos.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ramos. I have a motion from you. Do I have a second? Thank you, sir. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. CRWA 2310-063 concerning allocation of administrative costs in the FY 2024 budget. This is correcting the percentage allocation of administration costs in the 2024 budget based on cost of service. The administration cost of $2,373,362.17 in the FY 2024 budget is unchanged. This is just how it is allocated. Is this, Joan, are you doing this or is someone else doing this?
Joan?
Come on up and take a microphone. You can have anyone you'd like.
So in my preparation of the 2024 budget, the allocation for the administrative cost was incorrect. The total dollar amount for administrative costs did not change, just the allocation to the different entities. An email went out to all the trustees, I believe on September the 14th, with a recap showing these changes.
Joan, thank you for being diligent in catching that. I know that.
And he notified me.
It's not here, but we thank him anyhow. Have any discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion. By Ms.
Second.
Frankie, second by Mr. Gibbs. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Outstanding. D, CRWA 2310-064 concerning the Master Engineering Services Agreement and scope of work for Garber. This is related to the scope of work in Master Engineering Garber at Lake Dunlap Water Treatment Plant Improvement Projects. It was mentioned in Mr. Rolohan's report earlier. I'll turn it over to the general manager.
Thank you. As many of you know, we had submitted a request for statements of qualifications on doing certain upgrades here at Lake Dunlap that need to be accomplished. We got 6 responses, 6 statements of qualifications. We have our selection committee that is comprised largely of folks that get water from Lake Dunlap. reviewed all those statements of qualifications. We selected 4 for interviews. Those interviews were recently conducted, and based on a vote of the folks that participated in the interview process, the scores were tabulated, and the highest winning score went to Garver. And so we are recommending that the staff be authorized to negotiate a scope of work and master engineering services agreement with Garver for the Lake Dunlap Water Treatment Plant Improvements Project. Adam, is there anything you would like to add to that? Thank you.
Do you have any questions on this one? Hearing none, I am open for a motion. Gilbert made a motion. Do I have a second? Randy Schwinn, thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Item E, CRWA 23-10-065, concerning professional recruiting services with SGR to fill the open position of Assistant General Manager and Project Engineer positions. Turn this over to our General Manager.
As I spoke earlier, we are in need of some professional recruiting services because we're not being successful in our efforts so far to advertise for these 2 positions. And so we would recommend that we go out to SGR, who we used in the past to do the recruiting for the general manager position over a year ago. They were selected. I think they were the only firm that actually submitted a proposal at the time. This would be a sole source. In order to expedite this process, this is what we're recommending. And Lou, I'm going to ask you to comment as to whether or not there's any issues associated with going with the SGR.
Under section 9 of your procurement policy, and in section 9.1, negotiations with the professional service offerer, the authority shall negotiate a fair and reasonable price with the selected vendor with best qualifications. If negotiations fail, the authority must formally end negotiation and begin negotiating with the next most qualified professional. In this particular case, you only had one, and I think the policies that the board has adopted provide authority for you to continue those negotiations.
Any questions on this from trustees?
I have one. Where did the $50,000 number come from?
We had already reached out to SGR to get some information from them as to what their services are and what we would be looking for, and they volunteered a cost estimate to us at that time.
Any other questions? Thank you for asking that. It's a good question. Hearing none, I'll accept the motion on this one.
Make a motion to approve CRWA 23-10-065.
Do I have a second? Frankie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. F 23-10-066, concerning an engineering service contract with Hanson Professional Service Incorporated. I'm going to turn this over to the General Manager.
Thank you. We are in need of some good professional services concerning loans, grants, and so forth through state agencies and otherwise, aside from what we're currently doing in terms of bond issuance. We have a particular issue right now with the Wells Ranch 2 project concerning the generators and what is owed to the state. Back to the state, we have to get some additional funding on that. And we need some guidance to help us work through the process. In addition to that, there's other funding mechanisms through TWDB and so forth, and strategic government, Hanson is uniquely qualified in the name of Mark Hall, who's sitting over here. Some of you may know Mark. He's done a lot of work for us in the past in assistance to us in getting grant funding on a number of projects, SWIFT funding especially. He knows the ropes. He's a former senior level manager in charge of these loan programs at TWDB and can help us navigate through the process, which I understand is rather cumbersome and complex. So that's what we're recommending at this time.
Have any questions for staff on this item?
Only lots. First of all, I'd like to comment that the term secure low interest rate loans is an oxymoron, right?
Well,
Right.
I'll throw something back at you. The Texas Water Development Board sometimes offers substantially below current interest rate loans to organizations based on what they're looking for and what the plan is to provide for that. It's not all the time, but sometimes there are significant deductions on current rates. That's why when we say low interest rate loans, sometimes Texas Water Development Board offers a below market rate on loans.
So what's your target rate?
0, but I'm not sure.
Well, that, I'm being a smartass about,
I
about
don't think we
opening
can
up
answer
a
that.
blank checkbook to be able to go shopping for loans for an amount that we don't, that isn't listed for a project that's undetermined. I'm just not
I think-
comfortable without knowing details.
I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to shake the trees to see if there's some other ways of funding this where it may not be a loan, where there may be some grants and some other assistance available to get this accomplished. It's not only looking for loans. Because I know we could go back to Texas Water Development Board, go through that whole process and find more money. The object is, can we find some money that doesn't cost us anything? That's what we're trying to do here.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
the Water Development Board has been designated to be the state agency for the infrastructure funding program, bipartisan, and the subsequent appropriation that followed it. And Mark, you can correct me if I'm not citing those correctly, but both of those are supposed to include interest-free grant money. How much Texas qualified for, I don't know, but to answer the gentleman's question, infrastructure money that was appropriated about a year and a half ago went to the Water Development Board.
Go ahead, Mark. Come on up and use a microphone. This way we can hear you. Like,
The legislature this last session passed a lot of money, and they have $1 billion for a new fund called the Texas Water Fund. And so it's good to be in a position to stay in there with the Water Development Board. It's a difficult agency. It has a lot of hoops. And you've had experience with SWIFT. Does that ring a bell? So SWIFT was characterized as the easy program, and it didn't turn out that way, right? So I think it behooves you, and I would say this, of course, because I want you to hire me, but I think it behooves you to actually dig in and stay with the Water Development Board, because the legislature they're going to put all the money in there right now. And then so in terms of low interest loans, they have a term called principal forgiveness. Does that ring a bell? That's a euphemism for a grant. And what they do is they come up with a composite interest rate that is a low interest rate, but they take in consideration some forgiveness as well. So general comments. Yes, sir. That's correct.
and just so everybody, most everybody here is probably gonna know this, but Texas operates under what's called a block grant program. So essentially, a federal program has to go to some sort of a state agency that administers the money. In this case, for water, it's the Texas Water Development Board, whether it's interest bearing or non-interest bearing, it has to go through there.
And including federal.
Yeah, because operating airports, all the money is always block grant. So Texas Department of Transportation Aviation Division hands out all the money, even though they're not really in the aviation business. They were created specifically to support airports, giving out federal funding and state funding to airports. That's their whole, just like the Texas Water Development Board, that's their job, is to make sure everybody's got funding. Where the money lives. Any other questions? And Steve, I appreciate you asking the question. I see you have another.
Just a final comment. One of the very last statements in the request is secure necessary funding for various CRWA projects. I have a problem with that. You're asking me for money and you can't tell me what the projects are. You can't tell me how much money and you can't tell me what interest rate. Is there any way we can verbalize that we're just going to shop the rate and then come back to this board for approval for the final amount?
So first of all, they're not going out for any specific amount of money. They're going to find out where the money is and what the interest rates are. So we have a whole list of projects that are out there, including the Hayes Caldwell issues and getting that funded, and maybe using low interest or forgiveness loans on that. We have a pipeline issue with Maxwell and getting water moved around. There are a lot of other projects out here. So they're not going to get us an actual document with money on it. They're going to show us where these are and what our opportunities are.
Okay, it does say secure, which tells me taking a loan.
I'm sorry?
Verbiage says secure the money.
Okay. They can't do anything without the board's approval, period.
Thanks.
They have no authority to act on the board's behalf without the board's written authority. So they can't enter into an agreement. They can't take out a loan in our name or anything like that. What they're doing is they're basically opening the doors and finding out where the money's parked and whether we're eligible for low interest, no interest, or forgiveness loans.
Why don't we change the word secure?
And then I'd be a lot more.
What would you like to, one word?
Identify.
Identify.
Do you have a challenge with changing that word from secure to identify? You're fine with that? I think that's a great idea. I appreciate that conversation. Anybody else have anything to ask?
I do. Is there an opportunity here for member entities to participate in this with other projects that they might have that Hanson could facilitate or?
I would say the way this would work is you'll probably be able to sit here and copy down all the notes. And if you find something that's attractive to you, you can basically reach back out to Hanson, have you represent them directly. I'm not sure in the way we're set up that we could have them representing individual entities as well as the organization as a whole without probably crossing some sort of a benefit line here. So, but I think the data that they generate for us would be beneficial to all or anybody looking for money out there because they're going to be digging the same through the same papers looking for where our best possible funding opportunities live. So I think they're going to share a lot of data that everybody will be able to use, not just CRWA.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? The Shield.
Under financial impact, it says none, which is concerning because he's not doing this for free. And it says the method of compensation for services under a service order will be specified in that service order. Lump sum plus named reimbursement expenses, if any, and standard hourly rates plus reimbursable expenses with a ceiling price. What's our ceiling price?
I'll turn this over to staff because they're going to
Thank
be
you.
experts on that chunk of it.
As we have done in the past, we have executed similar professional services or contract agreements with engineering firms, the master services agreement.
Okay.
And then we issue specific service orders which contain a scope of work and a cost estimate for that task.
Okay.
So all this does is gets them in the hopper for doing specific tasks. So let's say hypothetically, you approve the contract and then we put them on a task to go out, this is hypothetical, to go out and help us find some money to fund some work at Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant, for example. We would issue them a service order for that task. There'd be a budget associated with it and so forth.
Okay. Can we just put under financial impact, something like indeterminate or something? Because it's not none. To be determined, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. It's just,
I understand that point. And essentially, this is the same as we've entered master service agreements with several of our engineering firms. There is no financial impact to enter into a master engineering agreement with any of the firms. There is no impact until we issue a task order or a work order for a specific job, and then it has a scope, it has a value, and it has a cap. So when we do the first piece, which is this, there is no impact. There technically is no impact. When we issue a work order saying, go find money for the Hayes Caldwell upgrade at the plant or the Maxwell pipeline issue or whatever we're working on, then there's a task order. They're going to tell us it's going to cost this much because we anticipate spending so many man hours to do this. We expect this much of fixed costs for ancillary issues, and this is what your cost would be. That's when we would know what the cost is. I'm good. This is why we have these meetings. This is
Okay.
great that we discuss these things. I'd rather do this than just sit here and hear nothing and get emotion. I'd rather hear the conversation.
you're not gonna get that from me.
But at this point in time, if there are no other comments or questions on this, I would love to have someone make a motion. I have a motion from Ms.
Second.
Frankie. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
I think Tracy beat you this time.
I'm sorry, Doris.
It was almost in stereo, but Tracy, I think you're there first. I have a motion and a second. Any comments before we take a vote? Because I see Mr. Cooper. Weren't we going to approve with the verbiage change? With the
Yeah,
verbiage change?
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
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 I'm
Okay.
sorry. Move
So-
to approve based on the modification.
Second.
And I've seconded that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, and I appreciate the vigorous conversation. I'm not making a joke. I really do appreciate it. It's a lot better than just sitting here and having nobody say anything. All right. CRWA 2310-067 concerning authorization for staff to negotiate and execute a water line easement for the Flora Meadows subdivision in Bear County. And is this ready for prime time at this point in time?
Not yet. We need to negotiate with them. We finally got, I think late yesterday, their final proposal with the corrections that we were looking at. Staff needs to review that with Trey. And so the objective here would authorize us to negotiate the final terms of that easement agreement with them. And then,
Bring it back to next
bring it
week.
bring it back for ratification. We would sign it and then bring it back for ratification by the board. That's what, and this whole language was crafted by Trey.
Anybody have any questions? This one's been dragging on forever because I know there's little pieces of information they've had to slowly put together to get this thing all wrapped up. Any questions, any comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion. I have a motion for Mr. Schwinn. Do I have a second? I have a motion from Regina Frank.
Because I was racing somebody.
Yeah, you.
I'm sorry.
You got,
Just trying to keep it.
been just
you
a
moving.
got
little bit
Doris by a
slow
half
on-
a second.
Slow on the-
All those in favor, Doris, you're coming in second. I don't know what's up with that. Don't hesitate. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Outstanding. Item 11, executive session. Board of Trustees will meet in closed session, discuss the following items pursuant to Chapter 551 of Texas Government Code, including, where appropriate, sections 551071, 551072, 074, 076, 086, 089, and 418.183, parentheses F of the Texas Government Code. And I'll tell you what, can I ask everybody, can we take a 5-minute break before we go into executive session? And I'll give us time to clear the room. Thank you all. 5-minute break. Clock's running. It is 1 minute till 9. We came out of executive session. There is no action coming out of executive session. We're moving on to item 13, future board agenda items. As always, and repeated many times in the past, if you have an agenda item you want to be placed on the agenda, please reach out to the team here, Hannah or John. I do ask that if you want something on the agenda, please have one of the other board members.
Only requires one now. You just passed it in the bylaws.
All right, so now all you gotta do is just tell me you want something on. Thank you for correcting me. If you want something on the darn agenda, just call up and say, put it on the agenda. If we like it, we'll leave it there. If we don't like it, we'll tell you why.
You're welcome.
There you go. Thank you very much. You don't have to know tonight. Again, if you have something you want on the agenda, please feel free to reach out to. We'll see how it fits. We may ask you to provide some language or some wording to make it go if we're not sure what you want. But just work with us, and I'm sure that we can find a way to get things on the agenda. We've been doing that. It's been working fine. We had an item that needed to be on there. I think we reached out to you, Umberto, or somebody else about the wording. No, it was,
Trey did.
huh?
Trey did.
Trey, yeah, Trey reached out. Basically, we needed what the wording was going to be. So we can get that worked out. It's not a big deal. Anybody have anything now that they need to be placed on the future agenda? We're out looking for new lawyers.
Legal service.
Trade's gonna have to reapply with everybody else. He doesn't automatically roll over. We, and I don't, it's not on the agenda, but I can tell you real quickly. Trey was given instructions that if he wishes to stay with us as our attorney moving forward, he has to reapply. But no one got a pass. It's the same as when you go out for new engineering and you basically, everybody, if you want to stay with us, you gotta reapply. Nobody gets a free ride. Audit. That comes up in January or February. That's when we have to go out for the audit thing. All right. Any other future agenda items that we need to put on there? Hearing none. Sir. You can, because I didn't ask for the word on number 14, so, at the request of one of our board members, yes, sir, you'd like to go back to item,
Page 6 of the Hayes Caldwell Water. Sir.
that's a good question.
This is under a motion to reconsider.
Yep. Well, it may be, well, right now, it won't be a motion to reconsider until we find out what we did. Then it might be a motion to reconsider.
Sorry, I didn't even see it until we,
No,
on page 6, Hayes Caldwell Water.
so it's actually it's in the reports from staff, from the general manager and staff, and I think it's item 6 something.
I apologize.
No. If you got a question, now's the time to ask it. We didn't hit the last one, so we can always go back and reconsider an item.
Haven't adjourned.
We have not. I'm sorry?
All right. Thank you.
That's ball right.
Thank you.
All right, so apparently there isn't really a question, and Stephen, you're good.
Good.
Thank you very much. Any other comments under future board agenda items before I move on to item 14? Item 14,
Motion to adjourn.
in stereo. Thank you, everybody.